It's 7:01. I feel like any other jolly come latelys can jolly come on in late. There's no problem with that. Hi, everybody. Welcome to your Monday night. Thanks for sparing some of this beautiful Monday night with us. I'm Kate McLaughlin. I'm the Director of College Admissions for Ivy Experience. I've been with Ivy for several years now. Some of you I know I see, and there's also some names in the attendees list that I don't know. So welcome to the party. I'm here with Alyssa Coltrane. She'll introduce herself in a second. The topic, the reason we're all here together this fine evening is to discuss the importance of college essays. So Alyssa and I are going to kind of talk about everything from when you should be thinking about them, what they are, what kinds they are, how we work with students, kind of big do's and don'ts, tips and tricks, things you can take away from hopefully. As Alyssa said before, in case you missed it, please feel free to leave us a question in the Q&A function. We won't get to it till the end, but we will get to it. And if for some reason we run out of time and can't answer your question or it's very specific, we'll follow up with you later via email. So we're so happy you're here. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and do our screen share. We're going to jump into webinar mode. And away we go. So the first thing I will say to anyone who's thinking about the college process is a line we use all the time, and it's actually going to be Alyssa's first. Here, let me just screen share this. We'll go slideshow.
So while Kate is doing that, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Alyssa Coltrane. I have been working in college admissions since 2017. I began as an SAT and ACT prep tutor, briefly had a stint in international education before fully pivoting into working with college essays and applications. I really enjoy working with students in this age group. It's something I had a chance to do a lot when I was getting my PhD in English from Rutgers University. And I'm very happy to be here with all of you tonight. But without further ado, when we talk to our families about college admissions, there are a lot of questions that come up, what about my school? What about my area? What about my last name? And we try and remind our families that ultimately there are 5 things under your control. Those 5 things are your grades and your rigor, what classes your student takes and the grades they get in them, their standardized test scores, primarily ACT and SAT, AP exams to a lesser extent, their extracurricular activities, work, volunteering, clubs, activities, sports, even hobbies can factor in. Your recommendation letters written by your teachers and your guidance counselor. And then finally, your essays and your applications. And ultimately, your essays and your applications are going to be what we're talking about tonight. Kate, if you'd like to give me the next slide.
Absolutely.
And the essay and application ends up being one of the most important parts of the essay for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's one of the few times that a student can sort of talk to the admissions officer directly in their own authentic voice to show their stories. So much of the rest of the application is numbers, or if we're talking about the student in a qualitative sense, it's something being written by a teacher. The essay is the only place where a student truly gets a chance to speak. And in that way, they become incredibly important when it comes to differentiating themselves from the rest of the pack. That's not to say that an essay can make up for grades, rigor, or test scores that are not in the range of a college or a university, but they do a very good job of separating the student from the others who may on paper look very similar to them.
And I want to add, I mean, that's such a good point, Alyssa. And I also want to add, when we say 5 things in your control, that goes, and it especially goes for like those of you who are like, wait, but what about the pandemic? And like, wait, what about test optional? All those things fall under the 5 things you can control, right? You can't, everybody else who's applying to schools is in the same boat of having dealt with the pandemic for the last few years and having had their activities impacted, right? Everybody's in the same boat of having trouble. If you were 2 years ago, maybe you had trouble getting a test spot. Nowadays, you might be thinking about whether or not to go test optional. That's something we talk with our students about. But in general, still, more things change, the more they stay the same. That's one big takeaway if you're not working. That's to think about. It's like, yes, there's a lot out of our control right now happening in the world. These 5 things are not. So that's just something to think about. The other thing that's still the same is that you're still going to get summer. We're like 2 weeks away from summer. So speaking of summer, Alyssa.
Yes. So often we have families reach out to us and ask about sort of when they should be writing their college essays. And ideally, in late fall to early winter of 11th grade, families that are working for us, that's when we start taking initial consultations, talking to juniors, and then they take sort of the winter to, while still focusing on their grades and their coursework. After all, of those 5 factors under your control, your grades and your rigor are the most important part. To begin brainstorming, thinking through the process, maybe looking into schools and thinking through what kind of supplements they may have to write. And then often we recommend jumping in almost immediately after APs, once the school year sort of settles down a little bit for juniors, because it gives you a dedicated period of time to work on these, because it's not part of the application that you really want to leave for chance. We talked about grades and rigors, extracurriculars, test scores. There's all of these things that students have worked incredibly hard to better, to burnish, to accomplish over the past 3 years of their high school career. And then when it comes to the summer between junior and senior year, it's really not the time to sort of drop the ball, but really to sort of keep running that extra 5 yards to the end zone and ensure that the essays match the caliber of the rest of the application. Ideally, for families that work with us, we recommend trying to get all, if not, most of, if not all of the essays done over the summer, because in the fall, students are beginning senior year. They're probably taking as many courses at the same level of rigor as they were junior year. They might even be taking a more rigorous course load. They're also seniors. They have other events going on. At that point, their focus should be on just fine-tuning and submitting applications, rather than while everything else that goes on during the course of the school year is going on, trying to hammer out essays and applications. It just doesn't set students up for success.
Totally. And I also just want to say, if you're watching this right now and you're not already working with us and you're panicking a little bit, don't panic. Maybe like, I'm glad you're here, but don't panic. Summer is just starting. It hasn't even actually started, right? So right now, Alyssa and I are chasing down our students who just finished APs. I will say, if you're in 10th grade and you're listening to this, the other big thing that happens after APs is English teachers, who I'm about to throw under the bus, and I can do that because I am an English teacher. On the next slide, English teachers will often assign AP, after APs are done, they'll assign the college essay as the last assignment. It makes a lot of sense. God bless you, English teachers. We love that. But that said, our approach is a little different from many teachers. So that's something we'll talk about in a second. So the last thing I'll just add to what Alyssa said is, like, there is no good time to write your college essays. There's just times that aren't as bad. And the summer of your junior year, even if you're the first full pandemic class, fortunately or unfortunately, is the best time to do it, right? So even if you don't work with us, take away from this slide, for your own self, for your own sake, work on your college essays this summer. Free yourself up to focus on being a senior year. You deserve it. And also those senior grades are really going to matter. So just to echo that.
And On that note of the best time or least worst time to work on your college essays, there is a worst time to
Oh
work on
yeah,
your
you're
college
right.
essays.
There is.
And that is after you have received your early decisions. Every year we have families that come to us after they've, it's very common after they've gotten a rejection from their early decision school, and they go, oh, well, I still have to write all of my regular decision deadlines. At that point, we tell them no. Waiting to write all of your essays until after your early decision schools have come back doesn't set you up for success. Firstly, you're only applying to one school, early decision. And if you have, 8, 9, 10 schools on your list, you then have 7 or 8 or 9 additional essays to write after you're potentially already upset about having been deferred or having been rejected from that early decision dream school. And often you're trying to do it in the 2 weeks between hearing back from an early decision school and regular decision deadlines in January. It is a recipe for a lot of crying, and it is a recipe for not a lot of success. Beyond that fact that sometimes early action deadlines, which is a little different from early decision, don't even come out until January or February. So you likely won't even have heard back from all of your schools before you need to turn in those regular decision essays. So we recommend, as much as possible, just try and get them in well ahead of the deadline.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. We don't even start work with an essay before 2 weeks of the deadline, right? As Alyssa said, don't do it to yourself. Can you imagine trying to cram it all? I mean, I was a last minute kid. That might have been me. Thankfully it wasn't, but yeah, don't do it to yourself. Spare yourself, you guys. This is
So
like
ultimately, the process is about finding a balance between like your essays and your applications, which are important, but we also understand try and enjoy your summer, do as much of your work as possible so that you can, I'm going to just keep using sports metaphors here, stick the landing, make it the extra 5 yards, give your essays and applications the time and attention that they deserve during the summer so that you can then give your senior year grades the time and attention that they deserve as well.
agreed. And if you happen, any of us if you happen to listen to the State of Admissions webinar with Sigas Vani, that's something, Sigas is like, we always turn to Sigas. And he was saying, everybody says junior year grades are the most important. That makes sense. But this year, especially with, everything going on, senior year grades really matter. So, keep an eye on those. Okay, this is the part I was joking about throwing English teachers under the bus. I'm not going to. I am one, I promise. But here's the thing that I say, listen, I bump into these conversations all the time. And I just want to kind of give you I'm a straight shooter. I kind of don't know how to be anything other than a straight shooter. So here's my response to this. So like a lot of times I'll talk to a parent and they'll say, hey, my student's a great writer. We don't need the help. That's amazing. I mean, I love great writers. I'm a writer myself. I trained in writing. The best essays though, and this was absolutely a learning curve for me as I started to understand this process and come onto the admissions side from the college education side, is that the best essays are not necessarily the most well-written. They're the most personally insightful, right? I can write a beautiful sentence. I can, but if it doesn't tell you any personal insight into who I am, or if it doesn't help you picture who I'd be on a campus, it's not going to do anything for the essay, right? You don't want an admissions officer reading an essay and saying, wow, that was beautiful. You want them reading an essay and saying, oh, this is a person I need to know or I want on my campus. So if you're out there and you're like, oh, I'm not a writer, or this isn't my thing, don't worry. Honest and true, you just got to be yourself and speak with insight. And that's what's going to get you everywhere you need to go. The other thing that I was going to say, this is where I'm trashing teachers, but I'm not. I am an English teacher. A lot of schools after APs, it makes sense. There's only a few weeks left. It's the next assignment students are going to have to work with. It's actually awesome. I think that high school teachers are doing this with students. The only thing that is different is a good English essay is not necessarily the same thing as a good admissions essay, right? We're looking for different things. The criteria are totally different, right? English essays, there's generally more focus on argument, less focus on narrative, right? There's less focus on voice, all these things, and insight, all these things that make an admissions essay very different. It's a new kind of essay. Students don't have a lot of practice writing that. And it generally gets tacked on at the end of the school year, which again, great intentions, but it's not necessarily teachers who are looking at it or coming at it from an admissions perspective. And they also, frankly, may not have time to get, when we work with students, we work on unlimited drafts. And I don't think it's, give yourself a fair shake to write 650 words over 2 weeks at the end of APs when you're exhausted. I think that's just something to think about. So again, all the love to teachers. I am a teacher. My whole family are teachers. Nobody get mad at me. It's just not necessarily a good fit for the college essay. Our guidance counselor said there's no pressure to start drafting until the fall of 12th grade. Again, don't do that to yourself. Live your senior year, keep your grades up. Depending on how many schools you're applying to, you might have a zillion supplement essays. We'll talk more about that, right? Some schools, Northeastern, great school, no essays. Tulane, great school, 2 850-word essays. Like, depending on your school list, you're going to have a lot to do. Don't put it off. Absolutely don't put it off for yourself. And then the last piece sort of goes in with the first one about needing to make space for sophisticated vocabulary. That's really, what they're looking for is authentic voice. They're not looking for performance. And the more years I spend in this job, the more I realize that's true. I used to say to a student, like, you could cure cancer, but write about it the wrong way and it wouldn't get you into college, right? If you write more about the process and not about what you learned from it and what happened for you, it's not going to be a great essay, right? So just something to think about. Like, you don't, and when it comes to college applications, very much our philosophy and very much our kind of proven philosophy is don't do anything for the sake of the application or for the essay. Don't try to sound like anything. Don't try to tell them what you think they want to hear. Genuinely, the best advice I can give you is your authentic self, and reflecting that on your application is your best shot. So that's the good news. You don't have to be anything you aren't already, and you shouldn't try to push yourself to be. You are enough.
It reminds me of, Kate, when you and I were at the International Independent Education Consultants Association conference this past week in Philly, and we had a chance to hear from the director of admissions at Johns Hopkins and the vice director of admissions at Haverford College, both of them agreeing on the idea that often the best essays, they come away from feeling like they have had a conversation with the student, and with that sort of sophisticated vocabulary, it's often parents or guidance counselors or teachers trying to do their best to help the student, but often in that case, they are hindering that kind of authentic written conversation from happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, they were great. ICA, we're still recovering from that. That was we had a great time at the conference. We learned a lot and met some amazing, especially admissions people. We met some amazing people. Yeah, and especially Johns Hopkins guy. Talk about straight shooter. He was amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so thank you.
Yes. So as far as elements of this written conversation that you're having with admissions officers, so we've been talking about college essays sort of broadly, but more specifically, what kind of college essays do you need to write? So the first and arguably the most important is the personal statement. This is that 650-word Common App essay. You may have heard it described as that way. If you use the Coalition app, it's around 550 words. Even the schools that don't use the Common App or the Coalition app will ultimately ask you a question that boils down to this. It's your personal statement. It's a chance to show colleges and universities sort of who you are and what makes you tick. This goes to every college and university.
Heart and soul.
Yes. Beyond that, you'll individual schools will ask for supplement essays. An essay that is specific to that school or university. Some colleges have 1 or 2, others have 4, 5, 6. I'm looking at you, Stanford.
Yeah, right. I knew it.
From a range of categories. One of the most common is essentially, why college? Why are you applying to American University? What makes you excited about Boston University? And then this probably the second most common would be, why this major? Why are you interested in studying computer science, engineering, biology, business? But there are other categories as well. They'll ask you to describe a community that matters to you and the role you play in it, to go into more detail about the most important activity on your resume or your activity descriptions. And then there are just some really oddball fun essays. University of Vermont, appropriately being located near the Ben and Jerry's factory, asks you what kind of ice cream flavor you are. A UVA, you can write about what your favorite word is and why. But there's the other sort of miscellaneous fun ones as well.
Yeah, definitely. Chicago's being the most famous one. They always have a release every year with what their new crazy prompts are going to be. One of them is about like a shrimp that can see in 36 colors. Like, what else can it see or something? They're great. I love, if you're hearing and you're thinking of applying to these schools, please come work with me because I love those weird essays. The one thing I will say, and we'll talk more about this in a second, but note that, Alyssa said there's a ton of overlap. We'll talk a little more about that, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Once you write an amazing paragraph on why you want to study computer science, why would you rewrite that for every essay, right? So we'll talk more about kind of the workload and kind of how to manage it in a second, but something to think about. Also, many school prompts are out already. We kind of tend to know which schools change year to year. Some schools do change their prompts around August 1st. We can talk about that. Even so, you can probably tell which schools won't change and still start that work this summer before August 1st. Don't try to wiggle out of it. Okay, so here's a really fun graphic I made that is really just, I'm calling it a dashboard. Let's call it a dashboard. It reminds me of a steering wheel, right? So it's a sort of like, if you have to think about what are all the components of the application itself, and what topics and things do you want to talk about or need to think about, please feel free to, when we send this out, to print this out for yourself. I'm going to show you an example with a kind of fictional student of what this looks like. So like, here's our kiddo, right? It's Alyssa. We love Alyssa. She's right here, right? So from her brainstorming, from talking to her, I'm thinking, okay, what are stories that really essentially show who she is? And we'll talk more about how you pick a topic in a second. What are the things that have potential as a personal statement topic, right? And so over here, I'm thinking, okay, she did this internship with Parks and Rec. She did bird watching. That's pretty cool. The personal statement is going to take up a big chunk of kind of how they see you, right? It's a big part of how the admissions officers kind of reading you and meeting you. The other thing to think about is you're brainstorming these initial topics and just kind of sitting and gathering your stories, or how do all these parts fit together, right? So if there's a community essay, Alyssa could talk about Spanish Club or the JCC or being a birder, right? You see the overlap there? Many of your things will probably fit in multiple slots. And a big part about this, and I always say to my kids, like, you're a person, not a Twinkie, but unfortunately or fortunately, a part of this is packaging, right? How do you show a school that you make sense and how all your stuff and interests and skills overlap, right? So here's what she could think of for community essay. Here's the things for activity. Again, bird watching could be an activity essay. It doesn't have to be the whole personal statement. And it depends on what material she has, right? For why college essays, if she's going to be a biology major, make a cool lead in to talk about her internship with Parks and Rec, right? So we're making a note of that there, possibly a double major. Okay, that's something she could talk about. The additional info and COVID sections, schools don't call them essays. They are technically essays. The additional info is 650 words. They're on the Common App. Both of them are there for your use if you need them. I'll give you my 2-second kind of thought about it. One is, for additional information, you really do want to take advantage of this to contextualize anything your school needs to, you want the schools to know about you. Sometimes that means, hey, I did this super cool internship and I can't possibly describe to you how cool it was within the 150 word activity description you've given me. So I'm going to give you a little more detail here. Sometimes it's, hey, I was diagnosed with a learning disorder, a learning difference, and I started using different, I changed classes or I changed schools or I started using accommodations, right? Sometimes it's just like, you need to know that this thing was going on in my household at the time and it impacted my grades. So it's not an essay per se, even though there's 650 words, but it is deeply important that you use it if it makes sense for you. You can always talk to us about what kinds of things you think you should put in there. And it's more sort of plainly spoken. It's not like a beautiful narrative thing. It's more, here's just the facts. Here's what you need to know. And we talk a lot about the nuances family to family of what kinds of things make sense to include in there. But basically, make sure you're giving yourself credit for stuff, and make sure you're also giving yourself credit for, if you've taken some hits in the past few years and it's had an impact that is visible on your grades or on your activities, that kind of thing, make sure you bring it up here. And if that makes sense to you. And again, we can kind of advise family to family. Similarly, they have added the COVID-19 section. It's a little bit shorter. It's only 250 words. The first year of pandemic, we said to families, listen, you may not want to talk too much about it because right now folks were still in the throes of the very first waves pre-vaccine. I will say to you, if you're a junior and you're listening, you've been in a pandemic for your whole high school career at this point. It's probably impacted you. It is okay to talk about that space here. So if there's internships you would have done but couldn't have, trips, anything that you couldn't have done that was on the books that had to be canceled because of COVID, you can list it here. Or if you did any particular COVID stuff, or COVID did impact your family or your life or your safety, that is absolutely something you can talk about here. Again, everybody else is in that same boat. They'll be talking about it. You should feel free to claim your story as well. But you're speaking, we want to speak sort of very, plainly and simply in these sections. So more specific questions about that later. If you have any, drop them in the box, but that's kind of the basic deal with those additional info and COVID sections. So essays, personal statement. We've been talking a lot about what kind of essays you have to do. Now let's talk about, now what? I know I have to write a personal statement. How? What do I write it about? Kate said I couldn't write it about curing cancer. What am I supposed to write it about, right? I cannot tell you how often a kid will come to me and say, man, nothing bad happened to me. I've got nothing to write about. Or, oh, I haven't climbed Mount Everest or cured cancer. I've got nothing to write about. So wrong. Let me get you back to this idea of you are enough as you are. You don't have to have done anything for your essay to have a great topic for an essay. So part one, I would say, we always say to our families in brainstorming, like part one is no arguing. Every part of you is important. Anything that falls under, it's something we need to know about you, means it's something we need to know about you, and it could be fodder for essays, right? So it is, when I say it's the most important part of essay writing, truly I have spent more time haggling back and forth with students on actual, like, don't we have a student right now, Alyssa? We spent more time going back and forth on potential topics than eventually we do on the actual drafting, because it really matters. And it's something to think about too, in terms of packaging, when I showed you that dashboard, right? If you are going to talk about your internship in your personal statement essay, you're not going to get the same kind of mileage out of the internship in your Why College essay. So you better have something else to talk about that piques your interest in that thing, right? So how do all the pieces fit together? Start by just putting them all down and brainstorming. No arguing. There's no arguing. Parents, brag away. Kids, I know you're cringing. I hate it when my mom, well, now I'm old and it makes me kind of warm and fuzzy inside, but I used to really hate it when my mom bragged about me, right? I totally get it. Talking about yourself, for lack of a better word, sucks. There's no way to get around it. But this is the fun part. This is with people who love you, your friends, your family, right? What do we need to know about you? What's your favorite color? What do you eat for breakfast? What's that crazy thing that happened to you in an elevator one time? Any possible thing, in addition to the other stuff you do, that you play soccer or that you are in debate club. Yes, we want to know that, but we also want to know all the other stuff too. We always say focus on experiences, not adjectives, right? So students will be tempted to say, I'm very loyal or I'm very hardworking. And while that's super great to know, you're not actually, you're telling me a fact and add, something about you without giving me anything to back it up. So if you want me to know you're hardworking, tell me a story about how you put in all your hard work, right? Show me your loyalty, right? Show, don't tell. Give us stories, not adjectives. What's a thing that happened? We'll read later about what it means and how it fits in the structure, but what's a meaningful experience to you? Why are these experiences meaningful to you? Trust yourself that the rest will start to fall in. So we always say, kind of in that vein, we say there's ideas come from two places: your resume, which is the stuff you already think of, right? So, your clubs, sports, internships, jobs, volunteering, anything that you would do and put and be able to write neat little verbs about what you did and how cool it was. That's your resume stuff, right? And it's important. There's a whole separate space for it on the app. There's the activity section on the app. There's also usually an activity essay or two to write. So the schools are going to get an idea of you through those things, right? So while those can be a great place to start, we also want to know what we call like your eulogy facts. And You're not dying, we promise. It's really just the, at the end of the day, if God forbid, were to walk into a black hole tomorrow, your friends aren't going to get up and say, oh, well, Alyssa joined debate club and, played soccer. They're going to get up and say, like, Alyssa had a way of making me spit out my coffee during meetings all the time. And yeah, Alyssa's like, too true. It's like, what are the things that make you, your habits, your passions, your hobbies, family traditions, weird phrases you always say? Do you check yourself in the mirror before you walk out the door every day? All those kind of funny nitty gritty things that make you, that's often the best fodder for essays. We've had essays from about everything from like the color pink to, I'm working with a family right now, I'm working with a sibling. We had a great fruit essay. We've had essays on favorite pens. We've had essays on traffic lights. Am I missing anything really out there?
Well, I was about to say that often, even the things that seem a little out there, like pen essays, can often become vehicles for sort of thinking through things that are deeply meaningful to the student, or reflecting on activities, internships, and volunteering in a new light. We had a wonderful essay a few years ago, I know, where the student wrote about essentially being in Model UN, but it was framed from the point of view of him starting to make memes about the different countries to help himself remember the various things. And it went from being an essay about an activity that a lot of students do that would be indistinguishable from any other Model UN essay to something that was truly unique and thoughtful to the student, and really allowed them to engage in that kind of conversation with
Right.
the admissions officer.
Great example. Plus meme forward, and I'm here for anything that's meme forward. Okay, listen, I'm going to put in the slides. I have two very outdated Harry Potter references. I know. All I'm going to say is I know. They're here. You can look at them even briefly on the slides as you look at it. Even briefly, here's Hermione. If you know anything about Harry Potter, this is going to tell you in 2 seconds. There's Hermione's brainstorming example. And then here's Draco's, right? You can see short sentences, not a lot of detail. The big thing you need to know here is she has stories and he does not. You can look at this later as an example. I thought this was funny when I put it together a million years ago. Now I realize I'm a dinosaur. That's fine. Moving on. So broadly speaking, if you want to look at examples of that, go ahead and look better. Go ahead and take a look at it. But kind of broadly speaking, what makes a good essay topic? What makes a bad essay topic? Here's the easiest answer. A bad essay topic is anything that's not personal. Anything that is you saying what you think the school wants to hear. Anything that is about someone else. That's like a really big one, right? Like if you're very tempted. And in fact, I'm going to say, I really don't like a couple of the Common App prompts for this reason. They set you up to write about another person almost, right? If you talk about your grandmother who's had a great impact on your life, and for instance, my grandmother, huge impact on my life, but over 650 words, do you think that an admissions officer is going to learn more about me from that essay, or are they going to learn more about my grandmother, right? They might see who I am as a writer, but not as a person, right? And the point of this essay is, who are you as a person? Cliched topics, that's going to be your kind of run-of-the-mill activity type essay. And I want you to say to yourself, like, you may spend, athletes who spend so many hours in practice, theater kids who spend so many hours in rehearsal, like there's no wonder that you want to write about, or you lean toward your activities for an essay topic. That makes sense. But you need to think at first, well, what's going to make this soccer essay any different from this baseball essay or this drama essay on a base level, right? They're kind of have a similar arc. I was bad at it and then I got better, or I was good at it and then something happened and then I got better, right? And it's like, does it matter if it's volleyball or soccer or baseball? Not necessarily, but there can be good essays about those topics, but you just have to come at it with a different angle, an angle that's going to set you apart, right? Make sure that the teammate next to you couldn't write that same essay about their experience on the soccer team, because imagine your teammate times all the other teammates and all the other sports teams and all the other high schools applying, right? So cliched topics, meaning activity topics, but there's still a way in. You can still, we had a great essay on football from a student who, guess what? He was terrible at football, but he loved it. And he actually got really into the strategizing and the talking with the coaches and kind of the more kind of nitty gritty bits of football that it's not on the field, but kind of the prep, right? So there are topics you can talk about, and there are ways to go about football and dance and music and all of those activity type essays that are interesting, but you got to push yourself for an angle. So that's what we mean by cliche topic. Controversial topics, obviously divorce, politics, religion, etc. That does not mean don't talk about things that are important to you, don't show your integrity, don't speak to who you are. You should, and you should be applying to schools that are in line with that to some extent, or at least open to and accepting of who you are, right? The idea is find a school that can be a future home for the next 4 years. So there's a line there. And again, we can help you walk it, but I think it's one of those things of like, basically, if you're not bringing it up at a dinner party, probably not a good idea. Imagine you're walking up to an admissions officer, shaking the hand, you get to say one sentence, what would that be? Make sure it's not offensive or likely to kind of shut that person out from hearing you. And diary entries is the last one. Sometimes, again, students feel pressure to talk about struggle in an essay, and sometimes that makes a lot of sense. And other times they're just working stuff out through writing for themselves, which is awesome, but it doesn't necessarily make for the best essay. So if that's all the stuff that makes a bad essay, what makes a good essay? So I like this, Eric, who's our co-founder, Eric Carlin, he added in this slide, which I really like, which is, we talk about on our team, some of our most fun meetings are going back and forth all the time about like, why this essay? Why is it your favorite or how come? And Eric's whole thing is he wants to see how you see the world, right? I think of Alyssa, we had a kid, Peyton, who wrote an amazing essay about airports. And I think differently about airports all the time now when I go into an airport, right? Alyssa you want to take yours, Alyssa, because it's so you and really good.
Yes. So I always want to, in a personal statement, to be able to envision who the student is going to be on campus. What kind of roommate are you going to be? What kind of lab partner are you going to be? What kind of club member are you going to be? How, if me as the admissions officer, if I let you onto my campus, how are you going to help make it an amazing, thriving place for every other student that is also here?
Totally. And I think that's one of my favorite perspectives. And Amber, our colleague, always says, like, I want to be rooting for you by the end. I'm going to cop out and say, I'm all three. Do one of those three. / just tie me in, grab my attention. So other things that make a good essay, there's no set formula. Authenticity and vulnerability are key ingredients. What does that mean? Watch your Brene Brown TED Talk. Watch the Ikigai TED Talk from Eric Carlin, our co-founder, right? Again, don't do anything for the essay. What did you really learn? Let us in on that process. How did you grow? What was that like for you? Was it uncomfortable at times, right? Any good story is going to have a little conflict in it or a little emotional vulnerability in it, right? Let us see who you are. I will say that even to the point of at the IECA conference, that when I started in this job and kind of came at it from a college professor's perspective, I was sort of more cynical about the admissions process. And the more time I spend on this side of the aisle, I think about, admissions officers, they really are people and they're looking for reasons to accept you and not deny you, which is not how I used to understand it. But the more I actually talk to admissions officers and work with them, they're people. What are the things that are going to let you show yourself and get this person to say, oh, I want this person here. They're not some big, scary, monolith. They're actual humans. And admissions officers just want to feel, and again, this is the theme, we've said it all the way along, they want to connect with you. They want to see what you have to offer on a campus. So it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So are there good and bad topics? Yes, like don't write about sports or dance, but no, because you can definitely write about sports or dance if you have a deeply meaningful way to talk about it that is specific to you and not the same as everybody else's experience, right? So there are great essays about all those topics. They just have to be personal. The more insightful you are, the more honest you are about your experience, your growth, that's where you need to go. So the idea of something bad or interesting happening to you being important is not. It's who are you and how can you tap into what you say. So I'm going to show you this next slide. I don't think it makes sense given the time crunch we're in to watch the video. You can look at it. This was a video that went viral last year about, some of you might be nodding when you see this. It's a college student, and sorry, spoiler alert, is that her essay, and I feel like one of these goes viral every 2 years or so. Her essay is all about the letter S, right? So she had lost, was it her mom she lost? She lost
A
one of her,
parent.
yeah, she lost a parent. And so and you could write that essay as, I lost a parent and here's the story of how hard that was, right? And that would be one way to tell the story. Instead, she wrote about it as the S, that it used to be parents, and now without that S in her life, here's how her life has changed. And she talks about what happens when she looks at her different like her theater and things like that. When you remove the S from the words, the things she's involved in, how does that make an impact when you take the plural away, right? Think about how many college students, and this is a sad number, but think about how many college students, especially in the last 3 years with COVID, everything else, lost a parent. Very many, right? Unfortunately, probably a large number of students. But this is the one that went viral. And it's not because it's, Proust, it's because she had the right angle. It's all about using the S. So that's, this is, you can watch this later. More to the point, there's a great Costco essay from a couple of years ago that our co-founder famously hates, that we can talk about sometime. But this is something to worth check out. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. This is her getting in, spoiler alert. Okay, last, and I'm going to kind of Alyssa and I are going to kind of fly through these next parts with a little more speed, only because I want to be respectful of your time. But the Common App prompts, throw them out the window. Don't worry about them. The minute you start reading the prompts, you're going to lock yourself into that box of, well, what is something I've overcome, or what is a challenge? They can be an okay place to start. They exist for that reason, but it's almost always better to brainstorm first, see what's essential about you and what stands off the page, and then see, oh, can it fit into a prompt? Because guess what? It probably can, because one of the prompts is submit an essay on a topic of your choice. So it's definitely going to fit in at least one of them. Oftentimes it'll be in multiple prompts, right? So Common App essay, that's 650 words. If you're using the Coalition app, you don't have quite as many. The prompts are here. I only outlined this one. You can read them anywhere. You don't need to go through them. I hate them anyway. But this one especially, reflect on something that someone special has done for you that has made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. How has this gratitude affected or motivated you? And the reason I am annoyed by that prompt is the whole first half, more than 2/3 of it is about someone else, right? What has someone else done for you? By the time you're done describing that, you're 400 words into the essay and you only have 250 words left to say how that gratitude has affected or motivated you. And then I'm like, well, what do I really learn about you? See what I mean? So start with you. You are enough. Who you are authentically is enough. Don't worry about the prompts. Here's the rest of the list of the prompts. Here's the one that says, share an essay on anything you like. So that's personal statement. I know is blitzing through that. I'm going to pass it off to Alyssa for the specific. She's going to give you the Blitz Why College Essays version. And then we'll briefly touch on how we work with students, and then we'll open it up to all for questions. You've been very patient. Alyssa, take it away.
And once again, if you have questions that you would like Kate and myself to field, please feel free to just drop those into the Q&A section. So one of the most common supplemental essays that you'll see is these Why College essays that ask you to think through, in many times, not only just why you want to apply to a given school, but why you want to study a particular thing that you want to study at that school. The examples we have here is the Why Michigan essay from the University of Michigan, in which, yes, they ask about the program to which you are applying at Michigan and how that curriculum would support your interests. So I am terribly sorry, but they do not want to hear about football, as fun as Michigan football games are. You can see something similar with the University of Pennsylvania, where they're not only asking why Penn, but also why bio at Penn, why comp sci at Penn. And in many ways, the best way to approach that is thinking through first, what do you want to study? What were the past experiences that led you to be interested in that topic. What have you done up to this point, and what your goals are in the future. That gives you that, as Kate put it, that beautiful one paragraph about why you want to study computer science. And then from those future goals, reaching out and doing specific research about the specific school to which you are applying and being able to marry those two aspects together. That level of sort of detail and specificity is one of the reasons why we say, and I'm sure people will be visiting schools and universities over Memorial Day weekend that's coming up. Take notes, send an email to the admissions office, ask them, hey, can I sit in on a class? Can I grab a coffee with a professor or a student, so that you're able to not only have sort of specific details and insights that will help you with an essay, but also the kinds of specific details and insights that will help you decide if you even want to apply or attend the school at all.
So real. So that I also want to say to that, like similar to the way I was saying, look around, and if anybody else on your soccer team could write the same essay about being on the soccer team, don't do it. Ditto with college tours, right? Like if you talk about, and you know, the big bullet points they talk about on college tours, if those are your notes, that's what anybody else is going to say in their why college essay, right? So what do you see? What's on the bulletin boards? Who do you talk to? You know, that kind of thing. But that's a whole, in fact, we have blog posts on this. That's a whole other webinar. It's another day. Anyway, sorry, Alyssa, you continue. Let's talk about one of my favorites, which is being undecided. Alyssa, I'm undecided. What do I do? I was undecided, actually.
Yes. This is a question that we get a lot. There are students who are deeply concerned about the fact that if they apply undecided, that it is somehow going to hurt their chances. And emphatically, no. Students accept undecided students all the time. It is absolutely okay to be undecided. But the way that we want to approach this is, we had a student last year who phrased it as, I'm not undecided, I'm multi-decided. It's not that I want to do nothing, I want to do everything. So one of the best ways to approach that is to essentially display your multitude of interests. It's okay to go like, I really like bio and here's how I might do this, but I also really like Spanish. And maybe these two things combine, but I haven't figured that out yet. You're allowed to still be figuring it out. That's one of the best parts about college. And also, your why college essay is not a contract. If you say, hey, I'm really interested in this minor at University of Michigan, and you get accepted, and you know, after a year on campus, I promise the admissions committee does not show up and say, hey, why haven't you declared this minor?
True.
It is projecting forward in a way that feels true and authentic to you at the moment, and it's okay to change your mind. Lord knows, I changed my major a bunch when I was in college. It's one of the joys of doing a liberal arts experience, which is what I did. But the goal ultimately is to display the sort of intellectual interest that you have in a way that is sincere and interesting and authentic.
Perfect segue.
Yes.
I was going to say, like, you know, one thing I want to add to the not a contract piece that you said, Alyssa, is that, you know, yes, your essay is not a contract, and what minor you're going to declare is not in a contract, and neither is, you know, you can dream in those essays forward too. You can say, listen, I want to study bio and I want to study Spanish, and it's my dream to, you know, set up a clinic in a Spanish speaking country someday, and here are all the different kinds of classes I need to know to do that, right? So you can, even if you aren't certain, it's okay to dream forward with specificity, right? You're probably not going to get very far with like, I'm going to make world peace, right? But within your interest, what do you want to do? It's okay to kind of dream forward in that way. We ask for mission statements. This is one of the things that I came up with with the team a couple years ago that we've been refining year over year. I like the name mission statement because I'm kind of a NASA nerd and it sounds kind of like NASA-y to me. But basically, I always tell students, stop thinking, like, don't think I want to major in math or I want to major in bio. I like to kind of zoom out and I call it like P's and Q's, like what problems are there what problems you got and what questions you got, right? What are some problems in the world you want to solve? Like maybe you are worried about climate change and you're like, well, I don't know what I want to study, but I am worried about climate change. So I'd maybe want to learn something about that, right? And or burning questions, right? Like I have no idea after a certain point what happens behind closed doors in law. I want to know, like, once it leaves the Senate floor, who's talking to who's doing what are those conversations happening? I want to get behind those closed doors and understand what those conversations are like and who has the power, right? So the more specific a problem you're curious about, the more specific a question you have. If you're me and you're going to college, my main question was like, where can I get the best grilled cheese in town? And that was a legitimate question. And it helped me figure out what school to go to. UMass, go UMass. So that was my undergraduate experience, right? But I think zooming out and saying problems or questions rather than like major, oh my God, maybe a major and a minor in this, but just think what interests you? What are the things you want to solve in the world? How do you want to make an impact? What questions do you have? And then what's the stuff that sparked that, right? Was it your cool Parks and Rec internship that sparked your interest in sustainability? Or was it that you have a grandma who saved every bag until there were 6 drawers of bags and now you have a whole, I'm not going into it. You get the idea, right? So like what stuff sparked your interest? What stuff have you done that's related to it on your own? What have you undertaken? Are you joining an internet group of some kind? Are you a Reddit moderator for sustainability? Like, how do you engage in these things in your life? And then do you have any idea what career you're interested in? And again, if the answer is no, that is a-okay. It's just something to think about, right? Project forward. How could I take these problems that I want to solve and make the impact on, and these questions I have, and kind of what's a career that could help me project forward? But again, you can dream. You don't have to know. It is not going to ding your application to not know. This is the Y College essay Venn diagram, Alyssa, if you want to take it.
So what can be tricky for some students with Y College essays is ultimately sort of striking that balance between, in some ways, the college is asking you to tell them why you want to study there, but also they want to know why they should pick you. And it ends up being a balance between you and the college and ultimately the overlap between both. How does, your intellectual curiosity and the skill sets you have and the goals that you want to achieve dovetail with the course offerings or programs of study that the college offers? We had a student who was incredibly into automobiles and mechanical engineering and had done this fabulous internship building parts for Formula One cars. And in his essay for Purdue, he was able to highlight specific resources at Purdue's mechanical engineering programs that would allow him to continue to pursue that exact passion. And I think he even found a team that was working on Formula One cars at Purdue, and ultimately striking the balance between the two.
That's a great.
Yes, between the two makes for a solid Y College essay. So hopefully you already know the you half of that, but how do you find out the college part of the Y College essay? We talked a little bit about taking notes during college visits already. We talked about emailing professors, going, can I have coffee with you, talking to admissions officers, but there are other things you can do as well. Check out the school website. Check out YouTube. More and more schools are also now posting on TikTok as well. This is something that sort of new digital research for college admissions was something that came up at the IECA conference that we were at. And also Google is your friend, because although these websites, these schools are now investing in TikTok and Twitter and Instagram. For some reason, they have not yet hired anyone to update their websites, and their websites are terrible.
Yeah, anyone who's not MC Escher, basically, to update their
Yes.
website.
If you are looking for majors, it's often more useful to simply Google search University of X, majors, minors, or, you know, Y college course catalog than attempting to navigate through the website. This is something that our students struggle with all the time. I will freely admit that on particular school websites, I struggle with finding things sometimes. So let the all-powerful algorithm help you out in this particular case.
Absolutely.
And we talked about this a little bit already. There are other types of college essays that you may write besides the Y college essay. We have a couple of examples here just to give you an illustrative sense of the range of things you might be asked to write about. And of course, all of these are essays that we have worked with students on multiple times. And Kate, do you want to tell us a little bit about how we work with students?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. I will say one thing I will note, and this is just kind of an interesting trend as someone who's been doing this for a bit, is like there's definitely been, as I said earlier, there are schools that tend to add or adjust prompts and there's schools that don't. We know the list. You can ask us anytime. But I will say I've noticed a huge uptick in questions that have to deal with both the environment and social justice, and kind of journey with social justice is a very interesting kind of hot topic in terms of college essays. In fact, to a certain point, maybe at some point that will be another slice of the pie on the dashboard. So that's just something to think about. So, okay, how we work with kids. So as I say, you have a lot going on. We know you're busy. We know you're terribly important. We know you're lovely, and we want you to have a good life, believe it or not. So the essays are not the only thing you have going on. We understand. If you are a junior and already working with us, we love you. Thanks so much. If you're in 10th grade and you're thinking about working with us, we love that. Thanks so much. If you haven't started working with us yet and you're thinking about it, it's not too late. Now is actually a great time. I'd say jump on it. We do fill up. The way we work with students is we start with this brainstorming conversation, and then you are stuck with us all the way to the end till you put down your deposit on your dream school, right? So Alyssa and I work together with students, and we always say, like we're here from brainstorming all the way to, shaking our fists if someone dares to reject you at the heavens, or helping you write a deferral or letter of interest, follow-up letter if you get deferred. We really try to be, supports, guides, allies, project managers through the whole process. Unfortunately, we don't write the essays for you, which is a bummer. I know it has to be your own voice and your own work. But that said, we'll make sure those essays get done. We'll help you with outlines. We'll break it into kind of digestible chunks so it's not so stressful. And we set deadlines. So my joke is like keeping the peace at home since 2010, because families, I just know it's a high stress situation, right? Tensions run high. It's a busy time of year. Everybody's exhausted. There's pressure, there's hope, there's fear. There's a lot that goes into the process. So we keep parents CC'd and everything. And we always want to hear from the parents. We welcome that. But at the same time, we're the ones driving the bus in terms of the deadline and saying, like what's Alyssa's like, sorry, some days we're deadline enforcers, but mostly we're just very friendly. So we work unlimited drafts. We give feedback on every step. It's a lot of Google Docs, sometimes jumping on Zoom calls, that kind of thing. And then lastly, of course, we proof and polish final drafts. So that's a big part of what we do. So in addition to that, not just the essays themselves, but the applications. So I showed you the additional info in the COVID sections. That's really important, thinking about the whole picture of your application. Also making sure the application itself is ready to roll and it has everything you need. And we provide support for everything that's going to come up along the way, curveballs from pandemics to deferrals to waitlists, right? That's our biggest, I will say the most meaningful part of this job for me is across the board, having connections with students and families and being invested in that process with them. There's something really lovely about having somebody rooting for you who's just there to root for you. That's our job. We're there to root for you and keep you on track. And we keep students organized. That's the last part. I know I definitely needed that as a kid. It was a skill set I learned late in life. So that's something we do. And it also, it takes the pressures off families and parents as well. And guidance counselors, by the way, who I love, but who are often, again, even if you are at a great school with a great guidance counselor, that's, one student versus a whole caseload. We also send students, we have these Google Drives full of resources, everything from, if you're working with us, you see it says college research. That's because there are sheets that you can take when you're researching schools for things you might want to talk about in your Why College essays. There's guides to how to ask for recommendations. There's a primer on resumes. There's all kinds of resources like that. That fun Venn diagram graphic is in there somewhere. You can look at that there. And so you get, you'll see specific worksheets. Some of them are PDFs. This is how to fill out. I have a whole thing about how to fill out the activity descriptions, which is sort of like a resume description, and, whether or not we should be thinking about additional information, that kind of thing. So I will say that, as a closing thing, just to reiterate what Alyssa said at the beginning, like your essays and applications are the one place that you get to kind of have your voice in this process. And whether or not you work with us or not, I hope you take full advantage of that, and I think, again, essays and applications, sometimes I'll get a family who'll call and they'll say, like, can the essay save my application? Is it gonna save me? And the answer is, of course, it's not going to save you. You're all the part, you're a whole, right? You're not just the essay. Your application is the whole of the application. But, at Penn, I think they said this past year that if they took the 2,500 kids they chose off the list, if they just went, we didn't choose those kids, and then looked at the next 25 students in the pile, 2,500 students in the pile, the the GPA would not go down, right? So think about that. So that's 2,500 kids taken, but the 5,000 at the top of the pile all have the same GPA, right? Or roughly average. So it is the essays and applications that can help you show, like, amongst this kind of crowd of, crowded room, what's your voice? So that's something I like to think about. So I'm so grateful that you took all this time with us on a Monday night, this beautiful Monday night, to hang out. Let me get out of this share screen now. Alyssa and I will take any questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. If you don't, thank you so much for joining.
So we have already mentioned that we will be, we are recording this. We will be posting it to YouTube. Kate will be sharing the slides.
Yep. We'll have a YouTube post and we'll share the slides out. Tomorrow we'll do an email in the afternoon with kind of like a recap, the slides and the link. It takes a minute to upload, annoyingly, but it will be there. So you can reach out to us if you have any questions, call us, email us. We're here. Any other questions?
So we do have a question of where can you find a school's essay prompts? So beginning on August 1st, once the Common App updates, all of them will be available on the Common App if it's a Common App school, but often schools will begin to release those earlier in the summer. There are some schools that have already released their applications, and that's something that we keep track of fairly closely. That would be one of the places where we talked about, you can just Google it, Cornell University essay prompts. Though in this case, we would defer to the school's website on that case if you're going to do that. Sometimes there are
Foibles.
there are other college admission sites that also post the prompts, and sometimes those aren't updated and they're from last year or the year before.
Any other questions for us? Thanks, Alyssa.
Kate, we also had a question coming in about students who are engaged in politics or sort of activism, and if we had any recommendation on how a student might approach that in an essay.
Sure. I'm gonna just give my real person answer. How about that? I was like, should I couch this? I'm not gonna couch this. Here's my real person answer. My real person essay is, yeah, you should talk about it. If you are involved in activism and it's important to you and it's part of your integrity and it's what you do, then you should absolutely talk about it. One thing to, I think the line is respect. Like, I think you can have different views from somebody else and still be respectful. But I also think it's a little bit of, this is where my English teacher comes out. I'm like, rhetorical triangle, like, know your audience, right? Who are you talking to, right? So if you are, I'm trying to think of like an example of, like, let's say, I don't know, if I were applying to, I'm just going to give like a real, if I'm applying to Brown, right? Brown is a famously liberal school politically. It's in a liberal part of the country. It has an open curriculum. It's very liberal artsy. It's kind of known for that. It's like, it's got a little bit of a weird character to it, right? It's sort of known for being very progressive. So if you are, let's say you are a deeply conservative student who's really excited about Brown, if that's genuinely true, and you have really great reasons why you want to study, you want to talk about your activism and what you want to study at Brown. And they have this great essay prompt where they say, how will you take advantage of the open curriculum at Brown? Then answer honestly. Like if this is a place you want to go and there's a reason and you're saying, well, I know that this institution has other, affiliations, but I love your spirit of debate. And I can see that playing out through this seminar that I can't wait to take, this awesome allied club on campus, this, that you hosted XYZ speaker last year, right? So it is a little bit of making sure that you're putting yourself in a safe place that you want to be, and in a place that, again, like we think a lot about match and fit. It's not about the best school. It's like, what's the best school for you? Are you going to feel comfortable at home? Will you have people to hang out and like get into arguments in the dining hall about politics with, right? Like that's really important. So if your kind of one side of the aisle or the other has shaped your perspective, that's fine. I think there's a balanced way to talk about it in essays. I think in general, hey, I'm an engaged person and I care about what's happening in the world is always a good thing if you can do it respectfully. But again, know your audience, right? Like I would be thoughtful applying to schools, if you're thinking about like any of the Jesuit schools, like for example, if you're thinking about, there's just certain schools, understanding where they kind of land on their politics, seeing stuff like what kind of news do they post? What kind of events and publishing are they doing? Like take the temperature of the school, talk to other students there. But in general, my honest thing is don't go to a school that doesn't want you or wouldn't welcome you. Like, why are you trying to be something you're not to get into a place that wouldn't be a good fit for you necessarily, right? That doesn't mean don't challenge the status quo or don't push yourself, but be authentic be respectful, be authentic. You kind of can't go wrong. Obviously, there might be very nuanced situations, but that's my across the board answer. Any other questions? No? Well, you all have been truly lovely. Thank you so much. Was there one more in the Q&A? Schools essay?
Yes, we just had one come in. If a student is undecided or not completely sure of their area of study, how do they approach the Y College essay, especially when the focus should not be anything generic like sports, location, etc.? So this would be the idea of it is totally okay to be undecided, but you still want to be interested in the school and still try and display your intellectual curiosity. Kate, we seem to be picking on Brown today, but for instance, Brown or similar schools with open or flexible curriculum might be a great place for an undecided student where they would be able to highlight their multitude of interests and go, I can't wait to have a chance to take each of these 5 different courses from 5 different subjects that interests me and sort of find my own path. Or thinking about Northeastern and its quarter system and its ability to and the ability it gives students to try and pursue a bunch of different things at once. So in that case, hopefully if a student is applying to a school, it is because there is something that interests them there and that matches with one of their interests, even if they haven't quite settled down on what precisely those interests are. It's fine to be interested in 2 or 3 or even 4 different things.
Totally. And bonus points if you can find any overlaps between those interests, right? Go back to that problems and questions slide and just think like, well, you can also, if you don't have something super specific, if you're not like, well, how do I change climate change or something, right? If you're not there yet and you're just kind of broadly thinking, I want to become more educated and I don't know what's next for me and I know I have these classes I like, sometimes thinking about is there like a value that the school has that you deeply connect with, right? So like maybe you're a sports kid who does pretty well in all your classes. You don't really have a favorite thing, but you love labs and you love playing on a team and you love group projects, right? So then maybe you're looking for a school with a super collaborative atmosphere and you can write your essay about no matter what I end up majoring in at Tulane, I know I want to become a better collaborator and the school's going to support me in this way. Or I want to become a better leader or communicator. Like there's some good specific skills like that that are kind of transferable across a lot of different majors. You should still talk about classes. And by the way, don't ever talk about the 101 classes. You don't have to say like, I'll take bio 101 and then 102. Skip over that nonsense. Go to 300, 400 level. Show what you're in. Those get like the juicy titles, like the really exciting long, we have to put in a colon kind of title. Those are the classes you should be talking about. Not steal from, but pull from the course descriptions, right? Read the course description and talk about the concepts in that course description and what you want to learn and be interested in. So I say, go back to problems and questions and then think about, even if I don't know what I want to study, what skills do I need to be the kind of person I want to be in the world? Like know yourself. What do I need? And then see if there are schools that connect to those values for you as well. Any other questions? Sound good? Well, really, truly, thank you for spending your time with us. It was such a pleasure chatting with you, Alyssa. Thanks, you're a rock star. We will be emailing you tomorrow with the slides. We'll get the stuff up on YouTube. Please pass it on to anyone in your life who you might think might find it useful. We do work with students in, what's the running total? How many states? A zillion states and a zillion countries now?
32 states and 26 countries, I believe is the count.
Yeah, anyway, we work with everyone. It's not too late. Don't panic, but do call us soon. Okay, thanks so much, everybody. You all have a great night. We really appreciate it.